Hey everybody, this is Ty Givens, founder of The Workforce Pro. I just wanted to give you guys a quick intro to Coffee with Ty from January 14th, where we had Mary Cleary, who is head of business development over at Frame.ai. So our whole conversation was about voice of customer, and our goal was really to help you as fellow service people understand how you can use and leverage VOC to drive business decisions. So Mary actually spent some time showing us Frame.ai's platform and how you can leverage that and integrate it with your current help desk or ticketing system, if you will. So you'd be able to turn some of the feedback that you're getting into actionable results that you can provide directly to the customer through your service team. I hope you enjoy it. Feel free to fast forward as you see fit. If you have questions, my email is ty, at theworkforcepro.com. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. You can also visit us at www.theworkforcepro.com. If you want to sign up for Coffee with Ty, next month's session is going to be the second Tuesday, in February. And we are going to focus on turning your service team into your sales team. So using that downtime that you may have, time between calls, emails, contacts, etc., to really increase your AOV and maximize your return on investment. That's going to be co-hosted with Steve Lavendier, 30 years in sales. So you guys really need to tune in for that. All right. Thank you guys so much. Enjoy Coffee with Ty. Givens, you are a part of Coffee with Ty, which is a monthly chat that I do with fellow service leaders or people who are just interested in or curious about customer support and service in general. What I do is we pick a topic and we go really deep on said topic, whatever that is. And today our topic is voice of customer. And so we have Mary Cleary, who is from Frame.ai, and Mary is actually going to lead the discussion on voice of customer in just a moment. And she's also going to have some really cool things to show you. So I just wanted to thank everybody for taking the time to even join the session and for expressing any interest in being a part of this session. And we will hopefully add some value to your lives. Feel free to jump in with some questions or concerns because the conversation should definitely go in two directions. So I hope that sounds good to all of you. All right. So here's how the topic will go. The agenda will go. We're going to start with a quick introduction. I'm going to tell you a little bit about me, and then I'm going to just go right into telling you about Mary. Mary's going to take over. We're going to do this lovely discussion on VOC. And then from there, I'm going to share job opportunities and roles that I am aware of. And the next thing we'll do is we'll talk about the next topic for Coffee with Ty, which is scheduled for February 11th, I believe, so that you guys know what's coming next, and we can go from there. All right, so my name is Ty, as I mentioned, and I founded a company called Workforce Pro in November 2016. And my goal with Workforce Pro was to give companies access to experienced leadership at rates that they could afford. And the thought process with that is I've run contact centers for some large scale or well-known brands like Shoe Dazzle and C's Candies and Thrive Market, just to name a few. And so that was really exciting. But what I also learned is that like these companies that are either evolving or companies that are really starting to focus on their customer experience, there was a lot of opportunity to mature those organizations. And in order to mature those organizations, you need certain roles or certain skill sets. And so while I had the task of like building and scaling, I didn't always have the available resources to make that happen. So Workforce Pro is kind of the solution to that. So what we do is we work with companies that are in usually a hyper growth mode, or they just simply need to mature their customer experience team. And we work with them in people, process, and technology. So sometimes I will fill in, like I have a client right now where I'm filling in as a support leader role to help them really build a foundation from which they can scale. And then in addition to that, I'm helping them to place a long-term leader. So they're going to get about a year's worth of output in a quarter because we're going to go really hard and fast on building out this team. So if you're taking your team from one to many, and that requires new workflows, new processes, you need to automate your workflows, find the right technology, maximize your employee productivity. That is really our expertise in what we do. I'll be mentioning Steve to you guys a little bit later in the call. Steve is bringing in a sales aspect to Workforce Pro, where he's going to be able to help companies really leverage the resources that they have to start to impact that bottom line. So that's a little bit about me. That's about us. Are there any questions so far? Not so far? All right, cool. I know I can hear someone in the background. I'm not sure who that is. That might be Mary. Mary, I'm going to mute for just a second. Yeah, I think it was Mary. Okay. So yeah, so that's a little bit about us. So topic of today, or what we're going to focus on today, is specifically voice of customer. You guys have probably seen the advertisements on social media, or you got noticed by Support Driven or Built in LA, or we have posts all over the place that are talking about this specific topic, which is voice of customer. And Frame.ai is a company that we've partnered with, and they have a really cool tool for VOC that helps to improve your ability to listen to your customers. So I thought, what a great idea for Mary and I to collaborate, Mary to come on and actually be able to talk to you as a VOC expert, and really go deep on what voice of customer is, how you can leverage it to be much more proactive in your business than reactive, and actually start driving some decisions that are going to obviously impact your revenue. And which, of course, is what you're looking for after you're improving your customer experience. So, Mary, are you there?
I am.
All right. So what I'm going to do... I'm
sorry. I just realized my video is not on.
Oh, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to let you take over.
Perfect.
And we'll go from there. So, Mary Claire, everybody.
Okay. Let's see if I can get this shared. Okay, can everybody see my screen okay? Presentation? Great, okay. So hi everybody, thank you so much for joining today, and a really big thank you to Ty for putting this together and for hosting. So I'm head of business development at Frame, and we are a CX, or customer experience data team, delivered as a SaaS platform. So our technology actively listens to your voice of customer across all channels, and then generates prioritized checklists of what needs attention based on things like sentiment and topic modeling and conversation scoring to help you avoid uncertainty about your customer relationships. So I spend a lot of time with our customers on their voice of customer strategies, and so this topic is quite near and dear to my heart, and I'm looking forward to talking with all of you. So, okay, so I'm glad this topic seems to be important to this group as well, and I think it usually helps to start off with a quick kind of definition and a why to make sure we're all kind of on the same page. So voice of customer, or VOC for short, because it gets to be quite a mouthful. Like many things that are admittedly a bit buzzwordy, but do have critical applications, can definitely mean different things to different people and different teams and different companies. So I personally define VOC as the kind of collective body of substantive things that customers are telling you across channels that either influence a positive or negative outcome. So the reason it's on everybody's lips today and has achieved that kind of buzzword status, for better or for worse, is it is really the very foundation for offering and for maintaining a superior customer experience. And customer experience is really the next competitive frontier. So typically it's owned by a dedicated CX or customer operations team, though not all companies have these types of resources. So if you're a B2B company, there's a chance it lives within your customer success or support department. And if you're a B2C company, it's probably, it's likely that it lives in marketing. So let's talk for a second about why kind of voice of customer programs are worthwhile, and kind of the types of organizations, types of insights that organizations get from them. Usually they're often motivated by a desire to increase retention or increase net dollar expansion rates. It could be a desire for fewer bad reviews, or to reduce the cost of providing high quality service, but it's usually tied to a broader kind of why in the form of a high level company goal. Does anybody on the line want to share, what their interest is in voice of customer, or why you joined?
I'll share.
Okay, thanks, Ty.
Yeah, no problem. I work with a lot of different companies, obviously, as I mentioned. VOC is always really a hot topic because yes, we know what CSAT is. We know what NPS is, but we don't necessarily know how to, or these companies don't know how to drive decisions based on the results that they're getting. And
Mm-hmm.
so I thought that this would be a really good opportunity to share with companies, like when you're looking at your VOC statistics, what is that actually telling you? I had a call this morning with a client team, and just literally yesterday, one of the reps, she sent me a message and she's like, are we getting rid of this CSAT thing because I just got a bad review? And I'm like, I don't want people to feel bad about getting a bad review because there's so many things that bad review tells you. And it may
Mm-hmm.
not be that there's anything wrong with what she did. There's the intent behind it. So I love for, to be able to share with people, excuse me, how the intent behind the result can trigger or render action.
Love that. That's great, Ty. I think a lot of people are afraid of the bad reviews thing sometimes, but it's, to your point, it's not always because somebody did something wrong. It might just be that the customer was upset because they couldn't find the answer they needed in documentation, and you just need better documentation. And that's, I think, a very helpful takeaway that sort of gets buried in the emotional experience of getting a bad review sometimes. So let's talk a little bit about the types of, let's say you decided to move forward with the VOC program. What kinds of insights can you expect it to afford you, and kind of what should you be looking for? So these are some things, that a lot of companies typically look to understand. So, I'm curious if anybody else has pursued or is thinking about pursuing a VOC program for different reasons, or any reason that doesn't kind of fall into any one of these three buckets. I'd love to know, how might your team discover an emerging issue or a competitive risk, or, pervasive need across your customer base? So who would have to see what and when for there to be a reaction?
Just a reminder to unmute yourself when you talk.
Hey, this is Emily. I'm from Tallow. I work in our CX and strategy team. We're a fintech based in Santa Monica. And there's probably one thing on here that I'm looking at using a lot of the voice of the customer outcomes for that I don't see, but it might be like in one of those three. And that's to drive product improvements. So we have a lending app that we work with a lot of customers in emerging markets. And so we want to be able to listen harder throughout the journey, and so be able to tie back customer satisfaction and kind of other voice of customer data that we've got to specific points in the journey, so that then the product team can use that to drive improvements.
Very interesting. So are these are product sort of features or problems that customers are running into that you're looking to capture more effectively?
Yeah, exactly. So rather than wait until we get a bunch of tickets coming through, and then go to the product team and say, hey, this seems to be some kind of an issue, be able to kind of track that a little bit more proactively. So use kind of broader sources of customer feedback, not just from CSAT and tickets, throughout like a bunch of different sources. So like Google Play Store reviews, or social media, or kind of other surveys that we're doing, and pull that all together so that then we can push that back to the product team and show them exactly point in time, like where the customer insight's coming from.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. It's actually a good segue to talk about voice of customer sources. But yeah, I mean, one of the key limitations of things like CSAT and some types of surveys is that it's hard to actually get the specific types of feedback you're looking for. So if you're looking for product, unless you're asking a very pointed question, you wind up in this like chicken versus the egg dynamic, because you don't even know what question you should be asking if you want to improve your product. You have to kind of take several steps back and listen more broadly. So I think that's a really good kind of segue. So there are three primary types of inputs to voice of customer. So there's direct feedback, there's inferred feedback, and indirect feedback. So direct feedback, these are things like those surveys, those NPS and CSAT and CES, or customer effort score for those who don't know, and things like first party reviews, so reviews you might leave directly on a company's website. I think one of the biggest advantages of these approaches is that it's recognizable. It's not perfect, but people kind of know what it is, and so it can be useful for benchmarking. But the biggest limitation, and I think Emily, you were getting at this a bit, is that it's very non-specific. You get a rating, and it's very hard to interpret what that's about, and sometimes you don't even know which questions to ask or which things you should ask customers to give you their feedback on, because it could be anything, right? And there's just lower volume. Oftentimes, response rates can be, about 30 to 35% on the high end. That's for NPS specifically. CES and CSAT can vary, but generally speaking, the response rates are quite short of 100, which I think is 100% rather, which I think is what we all would like. So inferred feedback, these are things like third-party reviews. So, perhaps it's a review on a G2 Crowd, or maybe even Amazon in some cases. Social media, so this is kind of where like the sprinklers of the world come into play, and they listen to what companies' customers are saying on Twitter and Facebook and so forth, forums. And then indirect feedback, this big pool of some of the things you were mentioning, Emily, like support tickets and calls and email and that sort of thing. So I think it's important to note that there's definitely a seat at the table for each of these types, and they're all important, but they're not created equally, and there are some really important differences to be aware of kind of as you think about a voice of customer program. So I'd like to talk about indirect feedback for a moment here, and also just as a quick backup, what I've plotted here on these two axes are volumes, or how much data is there sort of available to work with, and ease of incorporation. So, how easy is it, how user-friendly, I guess, is that specific type of input to a voice of customer program. So volume, higher up you go, the more volume there is. So why indirect feedback is up there with volume is think about, the massive literal volumes of, calls you get each day, or the average big company gets each day, support tickets and chats and, various channels that your customers are flooding with feedback to you. There's a lot there, right? Ease of incorporation, direct feedback is pretty easy to incorporate because it's structured data, right? You get an NPS rating or a CSAT rating, and it's a number. It's 1 through 10 if it's NPS. Sometimes it's 1 through 10 if it's CSAT, that sort of thing. And indirect feedback. Why is it traditionally less user friendly, even though it's so important? So importantly, this is unstructured data. And unstructured data is incredibly difficult to analyze without specific expertise. And because of that, as a result, most companies have a really serious gap in their infrastructure that actually leaves them incapable of listening to a huge chunk of their voice of customer. And because they're not equipped to listen, they're relying really on this direct feedback group, which is important as a general contribution. But as a standalone, it's low coverage, it's high latency, and it tells, a very small piece of the story. So I wanted to just pause here briefly. Any questions about these types of feedback inputs, or, anybody have a different experience with these types of data?
I'll give someone else a chance, then I'll jump in.
Well, this is Dana. So my business is a website, a blog. I have a hair extension business, and so I'm building a blog. And so my voice of the customer is me really putting out information and then asking them for their input. So I'll ask them specific questions about how they feel about a blog that I put out. So I'm just wondering where my voice of the customer would fall in here. Is it inferred?
So the blogs that I'll go back a slide here. So the blogs that you're mentioning, are they on your own website, or are you guys?
Yes.
blogging. Okay.
Yes.
So I would say, and you're asking them in a survey format, or you're kind of looking at comments on the blog that customers leave?
I'm looking at comments on the blogs. Actually, I'm trying to get, it's really new. So my blog is, it's pretty new. So I'm putting the questions out there, and I'm trying to get their feedback.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I am right now.
Okay. I would say that's probably in the direct feedback column. Direct feedback, so these are just examples that I have on the slides, but direct feedback, think of it as anything where customers know that you're listening. So they're sort of telling it to you. So if it's on your website and it's part of your blog, I would say that's direct feedback. If now you went to, Amazon or something, and you were reading a review of your hair extensions there, that would be more inferred feedback, because they don't necessarily know that you're going to go and see that.
Okay.
And then, indirect feedback in your case would be if they emailed you and said, hey, do these hair extensions come in a different color or different length or something, or, they were amazing, or they, were itchy, or, they were any sort of feedback that they tell you in an unstructured format.
Okay. Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Thanks.
Cool.
I have my opinion on this one, but I would love to hear yours on the importance of, I work a lot with contact centers, and so I understand that there is a ton of indirect feedback that you get, and sometimes it can be challenging to action it. I find that we will action indirect feedback directly by issuing that survey after the engagement, or on some consistent basis, for example, NPS. But in your experience, even with the Frame.ai platform, how is indirect feedback collected and made actionable?
Great question. So it's collected by usually via an OAuth mechanism. So we basically take read-only access to customer data that lives in platforms like Zendesk or Salesforce Service Cloud. Sometimes directly in their email, sometimes that's synced to a CRM like Salesforce, or chat platforms like Intercom or Drift and Help Scout and that sort of thing. So they all have pretty robust APIs that we then connect to. It takes about a second to hook up most standard connectors. If you wanted to bring in your call center data, which a lot of customers do, for example, it's slightly more involved, but generally speaking, it takes less than a minute to configure read-only access. So that comes in, and then we have some proprietary natural language processing technology that then does the kind of conversation scoring and topic modeling and sentiment analysis that's sort of readies all of this unstructured data for analysis.
Got it. Thank you. That's very cool.
Yeah, we're excited about it. Okay. So any other experiences that folks want to share with different types of feedback?
I do want to ask, Emily, if you don't mind, which CRM are you guys using?
We have our own built in-house.
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. I know, because I saw on your blog, Mary, that you guys integrate with Freshdesk. I saw Help Scout, Zendesk. Are there any other? You mentioned a few.
Our sorry, Ty, our ticketing system.
Yeah.
Zendesk. But our CRM is like our customer database is in-house.
Got you. Okay. I have to work on my nomenclature, because I call Zendesk the CRM, but I get why you would not. So,
well, Zendesk does have some newer, albeit CRM functionality.
Yeah, they do. They've just launched like Sunshine, which I think is their CRM tool. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. Is anyone else on the line using Zendesk or Freshdesk? Help Scout?
Hi, this is Shireen. I work at BiblioCommons. We do use Zendesk as well. And right now I'm really early on in a VOC sort of program. So just kind of came here to learn more about it.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
My pleasure.
Yeah. Anybody else? It's more fun when you guys jump in. No pressure, though. Okay, Mary, back to you.
All right, I'm feeling guilty. I'll jump in.
Okay, please do.
This is Brad. I work for a B2B printing company, and maybe like Sharon, we are just starting into the CX program and doing VOC very ad hoc in a very manual way. Our NPS scores are scored and gathered and categorized by me. So it's a CX of one team, and
Okay.
then put together the presentation and then reach out to the individual stakeholders asking them to follow up. But like I believe it was Emily, we do use the data that we collect to try to influence our product team as well.
Nice.
Interesting. Yeah, that's really common, is getting product feedback.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Okay, cool. So a couple things I wanted to kind of sum up, or things we typically see with voice of customer strategies for folks to keep in mind. So number one, direct feedback alone is typically insufficient. So all three types of feedback are really, really important. Inferred and indirect feedback in particular are extremely valuable and more difficult to acquire. Especially when survey response rates are 30 to 35% at the high end. You're really leaving a lot on the table there and a lot of uncertainty. So number two would be to examine feedback in context. So just a piece of raw feedback doesn't really help you, right? So you want to see the conversation it came from, what the dynamic was, why did the customer reach out, what was their sentiment, and really try to get an idea of what their why was. A lot of times customers ask for things and it's unclear what exactly they're trying to do with that, and maybe there's an easier way that they're not aware of, or maybe they want it because they're really angry about something else. But all in, it's just important to understand why they want what it is, what they're telling you that they want. Kind of similarly, it's also really important to segment your customers to help you, mostly to help you prioritize effectively. So sentiment is a really helpful vector for B2B or B2C companies. But if you're a B2B company, you might want to look at ARR, or annual recurring revenue thresholds, and customer tenure as for example, as kind of vectors to help prioritize. So for example, it doesn't mean that a new customer is any less valuable. It just means that maybe if they're in their first week, maybe they haven't been fully onboarded yet, and so their feature request is actually something you have. And if one customer is paying you $1 and another customer is paying you $1 million, it's probably not the best ROI to do the one that pays you $1 first, and that sort of thing. And if you're a B2C customer, you might also want to look at things like loyalty program affiliations. So presumably the customer has accumulated lots and lots of points with you and that sort of thing. You may want to prioritize that over somebody who's brand new or doing a trial. So a couple more things here. So voice of customer, or CX, really is a team effort, and the voice of customer should live in multiple parts of the organization, even if it's explicitly owned by one team. So marketing is probably interested in a slightly different lens than, say, product. So it's really important to make sure that different cross-functional teams not only have access to the data that you're gathering, whether that's direct or indirect or inferred, but also have the ability to kind of slice and dice and draw their own conclusions to answer their own more specific questions.
Can I jump in really quickly right here?
Yeah, please.
This one is super, 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 super important. I had a client that I worked with over the holiday season, and they had the most unique support setup. The person who was the head of shipping actually answered the questions related to shipping. And it sounds like a small thing and like a duh, but I've never seen that anywhere. And so what was very cool about that is he got such direct, clear feedback on his processes that he was able to make quick iterations and changes to his workflow to benefit the customer almost immediately. So, and that's, him being hands-on. So when you talk about it being a cross-functional effort, like rolling out that information or rolling it out so that other parts of the organization can see what people are saying about things that, sometimes we decide in a vacuum or we think are working just fine because we're not actually dealing with it. It's so important. So just as someone who works across CX all the time, one of my goals is always to branch out and work across each of the functional teams and provide actionable, valuable information for them. So
definitely so important. Does anybody else have experiences they want to share, or any questions about sharing, socializing voice of customer internally?
Quite honestly, this is Brad again. We struggle with that as far as getting that information out in a way that gets down to the grassroots in a meaningful way. And also from the feedback loop, I have just found it immensely difficult having disparate systems. We've got our call center on Freshdesk, but we've got sales on Salesforce CRM, and a myriad of apps to really be able to track the closed loop in with our our customer success managers. So I mean, it's just a tangled web. I don't expect a resolution here. It's just kind of voicing a frustration.
Yeah, definitely. Well, well, we should talk. I would love to see if we can help you with that.
Yeah,
It's very common.
same thing, especially with your systems that are not speaking to each other. I use Freshdesk. There's an integration with Salesforce. Frame.ai has APIs and integrates with everything. Like, we can help you tell the story for sure.
All right, look forward to talking.
Yeah, and Brad, you also made another good point. So about closing the feedback loop. So what I initially meant by this point was kind of closing the loop with customers, making sure you tell them that you're listening. If you fix a bug, let them know. If you implement a feature that they've requested, let them know. But you made a really good point about closing the loop internally, and making sure that especially since people live in different systems of record day in and day out, making sure that somebody knows that something was resolved effectively, and somebody knows that they're accountable or on the hook for something. So that is incredibly important as well.
Yeah, well, I know my CSMs are actually following up, because if I go to the right system, I can find it. But yeah, I know they're working with the customers, but I have to work very hard to find out what happened.
Right.
Sorry, that was a ramble.
No, it's okay.
All good. It was good information. I'm saying okay, but I was on mute.
And I'm nodding my head aggressively, as you can probably see. Okay, cool. So now if you'll indulge me, I'd love to give a kind of brief introduction to Frame. So let me move ahead here. So oops, did that work? Yes, okay, so Frame really eliminates the challenge of featuring your indirect feedback as a critical part of your VOC strategy. So we help you prioritize feedback based on important signals like sentiment and CRM metadata, like those, ARR or annual recurring revenue thresholds, or customer tenure thresholds I was mentioning earlier. We help you prioritize feedback based on important signals like sentiment and CRM data. And we're also going to make it super easy for you to share your voice of customer with your entire organization. So Brad, we should definitely talk about that. So we're really like an early warning system that delivers prioritized accounts and segments, themes, as well as team behaviors to follow up on, kind of based on these important things that customers are telling you day in and day out. In these channels, we were mentioning like Zendesk and Freshdesk and Salesforce, in your call center, in emails, even survey ratings, and in your community. So I'm going to do just a really brief demo, and I'm going to work backwards, if that's okay, and show you kind of what we call the Frame checklist. So on the left here is what we call a Frame checklist, and then I can give you kind of a quick preview of how we got here. So this is kind of the cornerstone of a really proactive, data-driven voice of customer strategy. And here we're surfacing conversations that require urgent attention, and we're really looking to prioritize your attention based on indicators of dissatisfaction and churn. So tracking, emerging trends in operational costs, so things like how long things are taking, certain questions that may be especially difficult, or heightened response times, as well as customer relationships. So looking at sentiment over time and scores, very long before they would show up in any other type of reporting. So a couple things to point out here. You'll see the second row here that it says discuss 3 highly negative interactions. So I'm going to show you, what our sentiment reporting looks like, and hopefully you'll get a quick idea of sort of how this translates into that type of report. So what I'm showing you here, by the way, is Dell community data. This is from Dell's public community, so it's quite technical. But we're looking at sentiment on both a qualitative and quantitative basis. So when I say qualitative, I'm looking at actual sentences or sort of pieces of conversations that customers are having in the community, and we're designating things as wins, issues, and risks. So if I click into any of these, it looks like there's one exchange or one sort of body of comments in the community where you know, a risk is being presented. So we'll click into here. There we go, sorry about that. And we're going to see the full context of the conversation. So we'll see, you know, who made the comment and the full kind of text, any tags that were applied, what the conversation is about. This I realize probably doesn't make much sense in this context, but but these are tags denoting, you know, the types of product that that the customer who is making these comments owns. So it's helpful context to sort of see where they're coming from.
And Mary, the risk is identified based on some of the language that's in the message or the post from the customer?
Exactly, yeah. So you can see, you know, but it's a stupid workaround to me to I think they meant limit, they said limitate, but it's okay, the max CPU speed. So you can see, you know, these are risks are where, you know, customers are sort of beyond an explicit problem statement. They're saying, rather than, hey, I'm trying to do this thing, it's I can't do this thing, or this is stupid, or this really doesn't work for me. And so these are the types of things you probably want brought to your attention sooner than later, especially if the customer represents, you know, a certain amount of revenue, or they're, you know, your biggest, longest standing customer, and that sort of thing. And then issues are more kind of explicit problem statements. So, you know, I'm trying to do this thing. And wins are, you know, just as important too. These are things that, you know, this is the culmination of your team's really hard work and effort, where they're being, you know, praised for either something about your product or, you know, something about your service. So I'm going to come back to the checklist here for a moment. So we had, you know, review highly negative interactions. We also see effort per case down here as sort of an operational flag to you. So how we're looking at that is we look at, you know, we measure responsiveness and volume as well. So exchange volume, this is a community, so it's a little bit of a misnomer here, but this is, you know, volume in the community over the last year. You can see team effort, so who was actually involved in the conversation, who were the customers that were involved in the conversation. So this helps answer, you know, coming back to our initial, what can I get out of a VOC program? What are the VOC applications? You know, what's driving that communication effort? So what are the topics that are coming up again and again? Who are the customers who are coming back to us again and again with questions? Are they the same questions? Are they different questions? And so forth. And then down here, you'll see new topic identified. So in this kind of generic example, it looks like, you know, customers are asking if there's a Slack integration available. And we've, you know, telling you to review 24 comments. So presumably there are, you know, 24 recent exchanges where this has come up in the last sort of recent period. And it's worth reviewing. And, you know, to the extent you don't have a Slack integration. So, you know, Emily and Brad, you were mentioning product feedback earlier. This is a perfect example of how you would get that actioned to you right away. So here are 24 people who've asked about this. Now, it might not be relevant, and that's okay too. You know, we're certainly not coming from a place where we're saying you should listen to everything, but, or sorry, act on everything. You should listen to everything, but you should at the very least be aware of, you know, what customers are saying and really what's going to move the needle for them.
Hey, Mary, quick question. So this checklist, this action items, this is, I might have missed this, but this is automatically generated, like it'll come up with the things that it thinks are the most useful for you to focus on?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, this is sort of like what, after you connect your data and we get you sort of minimally set up, this is like a very next step that should be available to you on a regular basis.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so I want to make sure we have time to talk about, you know, the other things on Ty's agenda. So I'm going to pause here. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. Well, if anyone has kind of voice of customer challenges or questions or initiatives they want to discuss, I would absolutely love to chat. So feel free to drop me a line. It's Mary at Frame.ai, super easy. So thanks all for your time and participation, and thanks again to Ty for putting this together.
You are so welcome. Thank you. That was very cool. I really like the Frame platform, and I think it's something that I can definitely introduce to people that I'm working with on a consistent basis, because VOC, collecting it, especially because I live a lot in the support world, and there's a ton coming through. It's going to be really nice to be able to show them a tool that's going to help them take action on that specifically. So excited. All right. So the next thing that I usually go over is different roles and opportunities that are available with my current clients. Right now I'm working with a company called Bot Industries, and we are really focusing on building out the customer success function. As you can see, there are a ton of roles. There's also a role here that's not listed, which is going to be the head of the support team. And so if you think of the support team, it could be like a tier 1, tier 2, whereas the success team may be like the tier 3, and is really focused on growing the team. So there are roles there too. I'm sure everybody here is happy where you are. That's wonderful. But if you know of anyone, former colleague, who's looking for a new opportunity, please email me their resume, ty@theworkforcepro.com. Let me know which role they would be good for, and I'd be happy to do an introduction to my client based on your recommendation. So also, as we continue with the Coffee with Ty sessions, and if you decide to join future sessions based on different topics, if your company has opportunities and you're looking for talent, please do send them my way. I think it's really critical for us to be able to help each other out this way, and I'd be happy to facilitate introductions as well on that behalf. All right. The next thing is next time for Coffee with Ty, we're going to have Steve. What Steve is going to focus on is making your customer service team your sales team. And this is his area. He loves it. He lives for this stuff. I believe there's 30 years in that space, Steve. Am I wrong? You there?
That's correct.
Yeah. So do you want to say just a little bit before we wrap up?
Yes. I first wanted to thank Mary for the presentation. There was some great insight in it as it relates to sales as well. And so I'm trying to think of some things to use. So thank you. And
the kind words, Steve.
You're welcome. And as we all know, sales is a very generic term. So we're going to first break it down into 3 as we use it in the customer support call center, contact center. And that is use agent downtime to increase revenue, increase your order value, and certainly maximize your ROI. And all 3 of these things are obviously intertwined. So we're going to put that together and break it up. And we certainly look forward to it. And thank you, Ty, for letting us talk about that subject. And we look forward to next month.
Yeah, thank you. That's all we have, guys. I am more than happy to stay on if anybody has any questions or concerns. If you want to ask questions of me, Mary, or anyone in the room, happy to stick around. But thank you for joining. Mary, thank you so much. This was really amazing. I feel like the information that was shared is spot on with solving some of the key needs of, us customer-centric folks everywhere. So I'm really excited to have had the opportunity to meet with you and to have you be a part of this journey with me as well.
My pleasure, and thank you so much for hosting and putting this together. This was fun.
You're more than welcome.
Great.